Hello, everybody. We're here again for another episode of the History Fuzz podcast, and I'm going to start this episode with a genuine and sincere thank you to everybody listening to this. 12 weeks ago, I started my new YouTube channel. We're now up to an astonishing 150,000 views, and I've gained 700 subscribers in a mere 12 weeks. So I want to offer a thank you to everybody who's tapped subscribe, shared it with their friends and family, and pressed that little bell icon for notifications. Please continue to do so. These actions all help the algorithm, which in turn helps my growth. And because of what you've all done, it is a vertical growth, and I'm astounded. So much so, I'm about to fully commit to YouTube and have several recognizable faces that are going to join me on there each week. Walter Payne, the remote viewing scientist and drone pilot from North America, is going to be a regular. I have a commitment from a top-ranking scientist at Niels Bohr Institute in Copenhagen. They're going to be there sharing their research work, their graphs, their charts, their photographs and drawings on the YouTube channel. Now, apart from the rapid growth of the YouTube channel, I've got some great news. In 2016, I published a book called A Twist in Time. That was taken off Amazon last week and replaced with the second edition titled Ropes and Ruins. I've completely rewritten the book, offering you, the reader, a fresh insight into the Neolithic monumental landscapes of Orkney. What I've done is taken the work of Professor Alexander Thom in the 1960s, which was followed up and supported by Professor Ewan Mackay from the University of Glasgow in the 1980s. Both researchers suggested an elite hierarchical class of astronomer priests must have controlled the society in the north of Scotland to have achieved the monuments we see today. I'm calling bullshit. I think they both went too far. They went over the woo line, which I like to call it. And I'm taking a step back and presenting the rope crafts that enabled the people to raise the buildings and the structures to within half a degree of accuracy as is measurable in Orkney today. It doesn't require a hierarchy. What it requires is a small collegiate of higher IQ individuals in a Neolithic society who have maybe come together, shared, developed, and applied their rope crafts on the landscapes, achieving what appears today to be an incredible degree of accuracy. But in reality, to have achieved the half degree of accuracy, axiomatically, we know they must have had rope production methodologies to within half a degree of accuracy. Otherwise, we wouldn't measure this variance within the monument. So, Ropes and Ruins, a deep dive into Neolithic architecture in Orkney. It's available now on the website historyfuzz.com and also on my Amazon book page. You can search Ashley Cowie or Ropes and Ruins. And that brings me to introducing my guest for this episode. I'm joined by Professor Radoslaw Palonka, an associate professor at the Department of American Archaeology at the Institute of Archaeology at the Jagiellonian University in Poland. We are going to dive into the Crow Canyon in the United States. Radek is going to present a monumentalized landscape equipped with hundreds of archaeoastronomically relevant pictograms and rock art. We're going to decipher the underlying geometries present in an assembly of huge stone towers that have been associated with the constellations. But we're going to go beyond these modern interpretations, and we're going to interpret this landscape against utilitarian aspects like hunting, surviving, trapping, fishing, and gathering. Close your eyes and prepare to get cosmic with Professor Radoslaw Palonka. Outline your involvement with the Crow Canyon Archaeological Centre and your work on the Goodman Point Archaeological Project, and describe the environment and where exactly your work is focused. That would be a solid start.
Sure. So my adventure with Crow Canyon Archaeological Center from Cortez, Colorado, was in 2005. It was the second year of my PhD studies at the Jagiellonian University in Krakow, Poland. But my research interest, scientific interest, was focused on southwestern archaeology. I mean, archaeology of the North American Southwest. That's its southwestern part of United States and northern part of Mexico. And I applied to Crow Canyon Archaeological Center for some kind of scholarship, internship actually. So, and I was awarded with this, and I spent 2.5 months of the summer of 2005 participating with Crow Canyon at the project, the new project they started this year, 2005, at Goodman Point Pueblo. So Goodman Point Pueblo was one of the biggest pueblos, the settlements of ancestral Pueblo people during the 13th century AD. Just before the total depopulation migration of this area, the Mesa Verde region, the southwestern Colorado and southeastern Utah in the end of the 13th century. So this Pueblo, Goodman Point Pueblo, was really big one, like 700 structures in this settlement or small town, maybe we can say. And so I had a privilege and honor to participate in these excavations, and that I was awarded as one of very few foreigners to participate, to be intern and work with famous organization, non-profit organization, Crow Canyon Archaeological Center. It's not maybe academic institution, but it's very famous, and has a really strong background, collaborating with different universities, American universities, and not only, but also having great programs of conducting archaeological investigations, surveys, excavations, but also collaborating with different Native American communities from the Southwest. Different Native American tribes and nations, like various Pueblo groups from New Mexico, Arizona, Navajo Nation, Apaches, and many other indigenous groups from the Southwest and beyond Southwest as well. Crow Canyon has also strong program for public, for even kids, teenagers, but also adults, in terms of education, education about rich heritage of Native American cultures, even pre-Hispanic, pre-Columbian, but historic also and modern Native American and their Native Americans and their involvement in, the great environment, southwestern environment today. So they provide many programs for schools, for as I said, older people, or even for retired people to participate in this program. So in terms of education, it's also not only research, but also the education and strong cooperation with different native groups. So this attracted, it was very attractive for me, and I was really lucky to start to work with them. It was the first year of our collaboration, 2005. And periodically I came back during preparing my PhD dissertation. I spent several months, actually, several times I was in different universities in the Southwest, Arizona State University on my Fulbright program, and University of Arizona, and different scholarship, Kościuszko Foundation scholarship. So and every time I was in the Southwest during preparing the PhD dissertation, I always went for several weeks to participate again in excavations at Goodman Point Pueblo with Crow Canyon. So from 2005 roughly to 2008 and 2009, when I finished my PhD program in Krakow, I collaborated every year with Crow Canyon, and it's still ongoing collaboration now, but it was the first few years.
How big is the geographical area of Crow Canyon?
The center, the Crow Canyon Archaeological Center, is located in southwestern part of Colorado, so very close to the very famous Mesa Verde National Park. The park with many ancestral Puebloan ruins or cliff-dwelling settlements like Cliff Palace, Balcony House, Spruce Tree House. So it's like just almost on the corner of southwestern part of Colorado, close to the border with Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. These four states meet, the borders of these states meet at one point. We call it Four Corners states, and Four Corners region. So it's like well-known archaeologically, but also for tourists. It's like the tourist mecca for many people to go and explore the countryside and archaeological sites, Ancestral Pueblo, Utes, Navajos, rock art, not only the sandstone settlements of Ancestral Pueblo people, but a lot of examples of rock art panels. Yeah.
What I find very interesting, and the reason I ask you for a sort of geographical description of Crow Canyon, is because I've already interviewed Professor Steve Lexon, Dr. Robert Weiner, and Rich Friedman, who are specialists in the Chaco Canyon, the ancestral Puebloan great houses and kivas in the Chaco Canyon. And Dr. Lexon explained that in the exact time zone you referenced, the late 12th century, Crow Canyon seems to be thriving when the Chaco Canyon was abandoned. Is that right?
Actually, the whole Mesa Verde region was thriving and flourishing, I would say, when Chaco Canyon was abandoned. So 1200s and 1300s, the area where Crow Canyon is located. So in archaeological terms, Mesa Verde region or central Mesa Verde region. So it's like roughly southwestern Colorado and southeastern Utah. There were many very well established ancestral Pueblo communities. So they survived in this northern part of the Southwest, actually northern part of the San Juan Basin, San Juan River Basin, like almost, no, maybe not 2 centuries more than Chaco Canyon, maybe 150 and 70 years more than Chaco Canyon. But again, it's like repeating episodes of migration of ancestral Pueblo people from one place to another. And in the end of the 13th century, maybe there were late 70s or early 80s of the 1200s, so 13th century, all of the ancestral Pueblo people communities that were living in the Four Corners area migrated and left this region. They moved south and southeast, like 250, 300 kilometers south and southeast to present day northern and central part of New Mexico and Arizona.
You just said that the cultures from the Mesa Verde region migrated as far as 250 kilometers to the south. The sole intention of my previous interviews with the 3 aforementioned researchers revolves around Steve Lexon's claim that a meridian was drawn 600 kilometers from Aztec ruins in the Chaco Canyon to Paquemé in Mexico. Now, what you've just said suggests that that's not too far beyond the realms of possibility than a lot of people have perhaps suggested. You're seeing evidence of mass migration at the same time.
That's the part of the theory of Chaco Meridian raised by, for example, Dr. Stephen Lexon. But I know that 250 or even 300 kilometers, it's not as far away as going to Paquemé in Chihuahua in Mexico, but still, try to go through this harsh environment, through these canyons, even for one day. It's really challenge. And going 250 or 300 kilometers when it's lacking of water because you were facing with periodic droughts, going periodically like 2, 3, and 4 years of drought, 1 or 2 good years and again drought. and you are exhausted, and the farming ancestral Pueblo communities were forced with this. Were they forced with dropping level of the groundwater? And many other issues, like there were increasing conflicts and violence between probably different Puebloan communities, or maybe attackers from outside the Puebloan world. We don't know. We don't know for sure this, but still, it was the challenge to. I mean, can you imagine these ancestral Pueblo communities lived in the Mesa Verde region for more than 1,500 years in this place, and generation through generation, and there were different times, worse and better, but still they remained. And suddenly, in the second half of the 13th century, something happened. Probably these environmental changes, as I said, dropping water level and droughts, but also some social pressure, like competition on the available farming lands, so conflict and violence between possibly different Pueblo groups and maybe attackers from the outside, like sometimes Apaches or Navajos or Utes people, the hunter-gatherer societies, nomad societies are claimed for this. Maybe we don't know for sure.
Most probably uprisings from within, because as societies expand, you get splits in rulership.
Exactly. That could be also again. So it's like the part of the maybe like a tradition of different ancestral Puebloan communities to migrate from one place to another. But one thing is different. Because different Pueblo groups in the past, like in the pre-Hispanic or pre-Columbian, pre-contact times, they were migrated from one place to another, but they came back to these old sites, So it's like not abandoned for always, And in this case, Mesa Verde, they didn't come back, Never, they haven't come back to the Mesa Verde region. So that is so strange. Why they didn't come back? So what happened that they didn't decide to come back? We know that they periodically came back, like in small groups, like making some offerings, because we can trace some pottery, like later pottery from the 14th, 15th century from Arizona. This is Pueblo pottery, but from this probably descendants of the migrants that came from Mesa Verde to Arizona and to Rio Grande Valley in New Mexico. So for several centuries, they periodically came back to make offerings, to make prayings to the Mesa Verde region. But in very small groups, it's very hard to find archaeologically this evidence.
Evidence has been found of people returning to essentially their point of origin in the north on perhaps a small pilgrimage rather than a commercial or economic mission. Yeah?
Yeah, to make offerings with this pottery and make prayings. So it's like no commercial issues. Maybe they were looking for resources, but we cannot see this. Rather to make like pilgrimage, like you said. So it's like with Chaco also a lot of pilgrimage. It was like the explanation of some great houses of Chaco community. Yeah, Chaco phenomenon.
Especially the matrix of causeways, roads, ceremonial ways. Rich Friedman described this beautiful interrelationship between astronomy on a calendrical level and also esoteric maps of their concepts of the underworld all blended together, and admits that the chances of us untwining or de-threading those and interpreting them correctly has gone. But I think that's fascinating to think that they were expressing concepts of what they could see in the sky above and what they believed existed after or below on a landscape. I think it's beautiful. I think it's such an abstraction from reality that it competes with modern literature, which is abstract, yeah?
So, yeah, in terms of the ancestral Pueblo culture, ancestral Pueblo communities, of course, many people know about the roads in Chaco world, linking the different settlements, different sites, even the sacred sites, probably. Not only the settlements, but the roads were also leading to sometimes nowhere.
Roads with no end.
Yeah, but probably it was the destination. We don't know for sure.
We discussed the possibility that these things switch on and switch off with seasons. 800 years ago, there might just have been a pond at the end and there was frogs, and the auditory value of the landscape changed. We have no chance of finding that out, but it's not just what a road looks like, it's what it was surrounded by and how it was affected by seasonal life. Sounds.
Yeah, exactly. So sometimes we are trying to reconstruct the roads linking the particular settlements in the Castle Rock Pueblo settlement complex that we investigated several years. It's a big challenge, I would say, because this settlement complex it consists of roughly 41, 42 settlements, mostly cliff dwellings. The settlements located in the cliff overhangs or alcoves, natural alcoves. So withstanding architecture, sandstone architecture preserved to second and even first and second story. So beautiful examples of 13th century ancestral Pueblo architecture and a lot of examples of rock art, images, petroglyphs and paintings. And also the towers located in relatively flat areas, but the towers we thought that maybe were connected with defense reasons. There are different explanations and different theories about the towers. The structures that we called towers. I mean, American archaeologists called the towers because they resemble the medieval towers, round and square and rectangular towers, the very high buildings. The highest preserved towers in the Mesa Verde regions are 6 and 8 meters. So really high.
Are these towers built beside settlement sites? Have you noticed any patterns in their formatting or location determination?
We tried to make this pattern, and some of the towers or maybe lookout structures are situated very close to the settlements, or even within the boundary of the settlements. So it's like 50, 60 meters from the living rooms and storage rooms. But some of the towers are located far away of the settlements, but in the way that from the tower you can see, for example, 4 to 8 cliff dwellings, and those cliff dwellings cannot see each other,
Oh, Radic, fantastic.
So these towers, to me and my team, looks like they were designed and functioned mostly for communication, as a communication system. So for, signaling.
Signal towers, these are like the brochs of the north coast of Scotland, circular towers positioned up rivers. And just as you said, while Broch A can't see Broch C and can't see Broch D, they can all see Broch E. And an entire landscape of people could have been motivated to move, to change, to defend within seconds, right? Light the fire and things change. Is that what you're looking at there?
Exactly. The fire during the night, or maybe the smoke during the day, or even the mica mirrors maybe, or different pirate mirrors, different kind of,
piece of obsidian.
Also, different stuff. And we know from, the literature and from the Western movies, like from the Wild West, that smoke signals, it's like a stereotype. Not exactly. It's not only the stereotype. Probably it worked because in the Spanish sources from the 17th and 18th century, the Spanish sources, because Spaniards were in this area until the mid of the 19th century. So they claimed that, for example, Navajo people used these smoke signals to warn for example, about approaching enemies. So probably the ancestral Pueblo people in 13th century AD in this Castle Rock settlement complex used the towers for very fast communication, because these settlements were so dispersed on these three canyons that we investigated: Sand Canyon, East Fork of Rock Creek Canyon, and Graveyard Canyon. So it's like the radius of 5 kilometers. But in 5 kilometers in flat area, it's not bad. But try to go through the canyon. It's like huge changes of elevation and very rough terrain sometimes to go. So even much more faster was to communicate using the smoke or fire, or mirrors, for example. So probably also for watching or for games, for animals,
And whether here comes the rain, get the animals in, or simple, landscape economics that could be projected to an entire group from one point. That it's such a wonderful thing you said there about it's a stereotype, because so too is tartan a stereotype in Scotland, but tartan represents this entire system of cultural traditions. And when you take the cap off the stereotypical smoke signal, under there is a whole communication system of ancestral Puebloan people. And I think these towers, please tell me more about the towers. I seem to have jumped in, but you've got me fascinated. I asked you at the start to describe the landscape, but never did I think for a minute that you were going to bring in these signal towers. That fascinates me. It's like an ancient mobile network you're talking about here.
Yeah, exactly. It's like very fast communication without cell phones or internet. So also you can send, for example, the messengers. That also the historic Pueblo groups sent the messenger. I mean, the people that were running, from one settlement to another. But it takes you some time. But we know that they did this. But also,
Radek, have you heard about the Peruvian runners? Dr. Charles Stanish talked about these runners that essentially the Sapa Inca had runners on all of the alignments between the Huacas, the main settlements, and they would run for 8 kilometers each, and they could cover 260 kilometers a day doing a relay by maintaining that speed. I bet that existed up there.
Yeah, but still, much more faster would be using the towers and this fire and smoke, for example. So it's like without question, But also, as you probably mentioned, these towers could be also like multifunctioned, also for monitoring, for example, farming fields. It's located in very good spots to monitor these farming fields. And we probably should challenge with the previous theories about using towers for defense, because it doesn't look that many people can gather in those towers, and they are so isolated without food and water. It's not possible to maintain for several days there,
But Radek, on a most human level as well, a tower situated in an open valley is not the best thing to defend you, because all you have to do is set fires around the base or starve the people out. Humans are brighter than to build towers in the middle of a valley and think that's the best way to defend. It's just not.
Yeah, one of the also very fascinating theories, but it's theory, that the towers could be used or could have been used as maybe stations for watching the sky, I mean, for astronomical watching and observations of celestial bodies and constellations. That it's, if you stay maybe, for example, at the bottom of the round tower, you can see part of the sky. It's a fascinating theory. Or even if you stay on the roof, it's much more better sometimes. But still, I cannot find any evidence in the historic records. Maybe there are some about this connection, but it's one of the fascinating.
You don't need a tower for astronomy. You just don't. You need a staff and a level field. Now, you can increase your ability to see a horizon But hang on, horizontal astronomy is purely symbolic. Anybody who's watching stars, planets, and the sun, the moon, culminating on a meridian. So you're going to build towers to increase your symbolic visualization of the horizon? I don't know. Don't think so.
Yeah, that also could be one of the possibilities, of course, as you said. And also, one more explanation, was provided by our consultants from the Hopi tribe, because during the project, I collaborate strongly with several Native American groups, indigenous societies from the Southwest, especially in terms of this Castle Rock settlement complex. I am vitally interested working with modern Pueblo people, and we collaborate especially with Hopi tribe from northern Arizona. One of the direct descendants groups from the migrants from the Mesa Verde region, for sure. So these people went, as I said before, to northern Arizona, to Hopi Mesas, where Hopi live today, and to Rio Grande Valley, and central western New Mexico, where 19 pueblos are still today also. So our collaborators and very good friends from Hopi Cultural Preservation Office, they several times came to the Castle Rock Settlement Complex. They consulted for us the architecture, the site layouts and location of several sites, and also the meaning or possible meaning of rock art images, of petroglyphs and paintings. And in terms of the towers, they provided very interesting theory about the possibility of, maybe you suggested this before, of like some kind of pattern of celestial bodies. I mean, the location of particular towers and settlements, like the exemplification, or maybe like the mirror surface of some constellations or celestial bodies. We didn't study this yet, but it's one of the ways, possible, research question for the future maybe. But they strongly stressed this possibility of location of these towers. For sure, they were located in the manner that enabled to communicate with these cliff dwellings, that, those cliff dwellings couldn't have seen each other, but they could see the tower, and from the tower you were able to fast communicate with the cliff dwellings. But still, maybe it's not enough, not the whole explanation. Maybe we miss something.
You've just gone right up to what I call the woo threshold, and here's why. Yes, I think in the outline I sent you, I perhaps asked the question, do the locations of the towers represent some kind of map of what is above, below, perhaps constellations? But Professor Giulio Magli made it very clear in the first interview in this podcast that rulers in ancient societies were explicit. That's an enormous labor force and task to lay down constellations in towers that you could never actually see as working as a constellation. So A, it's not very explicit, but B, the last time this came up as a proposition, it was 4 years ago, Radek. A 14-year-old child from Canada hit the news headlines because archaeoastronomers had signed off his suggestion and work on Google Earth, saying that he found a central pyramid in either Honduras or Guatemala. And he had then drawn dots on Google Earth and described 12 constellations in the sky. 14-year-old uses artificial intelligence and computer modeling to discover constellations in Maya landscape. 3 weeks later, the first skeptic came out, and then there was a tidal wave. And the Smithsonian Institute finally killed it by saying this is the selection effect. It's absolutely horrific that so many archaeoastronomers bought into this 14-year-old child's suggestion, and it just isn't there. It doesn't exist, but he convinced so many people. So rather than them representing constellations, I wonder if perhaps coming back from that slightly, but bringing in astronomy, is we all go to Tower A to watch the equinox sunset. We go to Tower D to watch the solstice sunrise, because this is where our grandfathers have done it for 4 generations. And perhaps the towers were associated with astronomical significance, but maybe no more than that. You know, I think there would be the line, and as you said, it's very, very difficult to try and prove it, because like dropping a handful of sticks on the table, 10% of them are going to align to the winter solstice sunset. 5 of them are going to be to the equinox. How would you even start? Because you're going to get results, but who could ever tell you if you were right or wrong, Radek, once you'd published that?
Yeah, that's true. And even more popular in terms of the southwestern communities, especially ancestral Pueblo people, where, for example, observation of some or particular days during the year, as you said, solstices and equinoxes, in architecture, but also in rock art. So
I would like to get us right onto the rock art, and I'd like you to discuss the first few steps in your discovery of the rock art, and maybe explain how you plotted them and categorized them. Where did you begin, Radek? And perhaps tell the audience exactly what it is you've discovered and what was covered in the press recently.
Yeah, actually, I started this project of documenting Castle Rock Settlement Complex in 2011. So it's like multi-year project, collaboration with Crow Canyon Archaeological Center and some other organizations and institutions from United States, and especially with the Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, because this settlement complex now are within the Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, established relatively late in 2000. It was one of the last decisions of the President Bill Clinton during the end or close to the end of his presidency. He established Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. So now it's one of the most well-known national monuments within the United States, and we work within this. And during the several years of the project, I think we done almost everything with the settlement complex that we couldn't, that was possible for me using all of the equipment we had. We used a lot of digital methods of documenting inventory of the sites, like photogrammetry, advanced digital photography, different techniques and methods. Also, 3-dimensional laser scanning, both terrestrial and from above. Last season we did LiDAR scanning, and we are waiting for the results. I mean, the guys from the University of Houston in Texas, they did the first serious LiDAR scanning of this area for us, and probably in several months, we'll have the results. So a lot of documentation, a lot of inventory.
Radek, I must ask you, for the audience, how many individual petroglyphs or carvings have you identified? How many individual? How big is this project? You're not just talking about a panel, a 30-foot panel with rock art, are you? You're talking about a landscape.
No, I'm just going to this point, but we documented 41 sites with architecture. These cliff dwellings, towers, and different types of sites, but mostly cliff dwellings. 31 of 41, there are cliff dwellings. So the habitation sites. And also within this settlement complex, we discovered 15 sites with rock art. So 15 of 41 sites, the settlements with architecture, also have the rock art, the panels with rock art. So, the panels and with paintings and petroglyphs. But in one panel, sometimes you can have like only 3 images, depictions. Sometimes several hundred. That's So it's complicated. So, so maybe several hundreds of images we discovered in these 15 of 41 sites. Okay. So, and we thought until last September and October that it's everything what was in the 13th century AD in those canyons, in those three canyons, because it was several years of documenting, and previous American researchers also did some surveys in 60s, 70s, and Crow Canyon Archaeological Center partially excavated 3 of those sites. We excavated additional 4 sites. So we thought with American colleagues that everything we know about this, but there were some clues from local residents living outside the boundary of the monument, but very close. And also I saw at the some site forms that maybe there is something more in those canyons, but located a little higher. It's not a little, but I thought that maybe a little higher, in higher elevation.
Radek, one second, hang on. Are you saying these hadn't been identified before?
Most of them hadn't been.
How can that be overlooked? How can such a huge swathe of archaeology be overlooked until you?
This is hard terrain, believe me. So, but to be clear, some of the sites that I had the clue that there is something, some of the sites were recorded very, very roughly in 1980s. It was prepared site form for part of the rock art panels we discovered lately. Maybe we discovered in September and October, so a few months ago, 21 concentration of petroglyphs. So 21 panels, huge panels, on the distance of 4 kilometers, located in 2 canyons, in Sand Canyon and Rock Creek Canyon, East Fork of Rock Creek Canyon. And those panels are located in really high locations and very rough and terrain that, for example, from the closest habitation, the cliff dwelling Sunal Cove site, you have 800 meters to first panel. It's not far away, but in the flat area, it's not far away. But if you have to climb from 60 to 120 meters above the cliff dwelling, you have to go at least 1 hour to through the terrain to see those newly found petroglyphs. But some of them were known. So these local people, and probably one of the archaeologists, Bruce Bradley, Dr. Bruce Bradley, was also with these local residents. So we know this. But it came to the archives and nobody knows about this until 2023.
I can't understand how after 150 years of archaeology, with satellites that can take photographs in people's windows, that such an enormous slice of archaeology has only just been discovered. And let's be honest, Radek, if that's there, what else is out there? But let's come back to that. I need us to take our time and focus specifically on the spiral. I'd like you to first of all maybe outline what was represented on these panels, what kind of animals, what kind of scenes, but then lead us into the spiral, because that gets us right to astronomy, the bit we all love.
Yeah, but I would say something more also, in terms of the part of the sites that we investigated before in those canyons are also designed for tourists. So there are some paths. Even this is more interesting, but still these panels are located very high. So tourists are not able to enter those terrain, only go through several sites that we documented before we made inventory. But also I have to mention about two or maybe 3 important people that helped us to discover those panels. I mean, volunteers working for making voluntary for Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, Ross and Maya Gralia, the couple that are monitoring some sites as volunteers for monthly monitoring. They are doing monthly monitoring for some sites for Canyons of the Ancients National Monument. They also provide me last year some points, and that maybe it's worth to before closing this area in our research project, maybe it's worth to check those sites. So it was like series of different, clues and maybe points that led me to make final checkings if we done everything, with this. And also Vince Macmillan, the chief archaeologist from Canyons of the Ancients National Monument, also strongly supported our idea of developing the project and maybe checking these sites, So I have special permission, of course, from state archaeologists, but Vince Macmillan is like supervising the monument in terms of the archaeology, and he helped us a lot with getting the site forms and data, So, and okay, but nobody knows that really it was something worth to climb and maybe not climb because you have to walk only. So I decided to go with my students, PhD students and co-workers, and Vince Macmillan one day, just at the beginning of last season, in the mid of September 2023. So, and we faced this challenge, and Vince had a meeting, so he had to come back during the first day. So he saw just few examples, but we explored for 2 or maybe 3 weeks these 4 kilometers of the huge separate walls, and we discovered 21 separate panels with different depictions. And in the first one, the most impressive one that you showed probably, you saw probably, there are 11 spirals, huge spirals, and the biggest one, is 1 meter in diameter. So it's really big one. 1 meter is, it's a huge spiral. So it's 10 or 11 spirals or, circles on this.
You mean 10 or 11 lines forming the spiral?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. 10 or even 11 in some spirals. So it's really many. There are many. It's not usual. And there are several more, not as big as this one, but they are located in one panel. It's a huge panel, maybe 11 or 12 meters in length, on the shelf. Below is the small shelf, and a little the remnants of the architecture. I would like to come back to these traces of the architecture, because it's not only rock art, but also the architecture was in association with those rock art panels. Not only this one, but also the next panels. So also the anthropomorphic figures are also present on this panel. Some concentric circles. And what is more interesting in this panel with spirals, there are also few designs of possible pueblos. I mean the settlements, like the depiction of the houses. It's like it's maybe not unique, but it's very rare in the southwestern rock art. There are some examples in Arizona or New Mexico, in Utah, the depiction of the pueblos, and we suspect that there are some. So it's really beautiful. Some plant designs also. Some rectangular, like spirals, maybe not like the meanders, some meander depictions also on this panel.
What kind of animals, Radek, what kind of animals are shown there? What were they hunting?
There are only animal tracks.
Oh, really?
Yes. So, for example, at this panel, we have bird tracks, so maybe from Turkey, because ancestral Pueblo people raised turkeys. So not only they were farmers, but also they raised turkey. But also in other panels, to the left and to the right, so I mean to the east and to the west of the spiral panel, there are some tracks of deer animals, of course. Some maybe wolf or mountain lion. The mountain lion or cougar or puma also is present in this area still in modern days. So
the apex predator?
Yeah, probably. probably mountain lion had a special meaning. I mean, maybe ritual meaning for ancestral Pueblo people. But the deer, for sure, even Pueblo people were farmers. They were also hunters. They were hunting on animals for sure.
What you said there is really revealing, I think, and I know this is pure speculation, but if you say there's not so many animals but lots of tracks, when I think about Paleolithic hunters, that a group of hunters would have spent perhaps 4 days or 2 weeks tracking an animal or a herd and 2 hours killing it. So they were master trackers. So to see the animal tracks is perhaps indicative of what they spent most of their time doing, not bludgeoning an animal on the head or trapping it in a net, but the 3 weeks where we lost half the team across gorges and being spiked by plants and spiders getting to the animals, the tracking being the focus rather than the kill.
It's a very interesting point, actually, what you said. So really, because it resembles me that one of the panels, actually, it's consisted of different images, geometric designs, plant images on these newly found or discovered panels, but also the track of deer, probably, that it's like going through 14 or 16 meters, meters on the rocks. It's like the line.
That's it.
Like it's maybe resembling like tracing the animal, something like that. So it's a really good point. Thank you for this. Yeah.
It has to come, and it's only because I have a background in fly fishing, and I know that the art of catching a fish is probably 95% not catching a fish. And it's days and days and days of trying to watch changes, micro changes in temperature in the bugs that are released on the sides of the water. And the more knowledge you get on the changes in the environment, the better you become at targeting the animal at the end. And I think that's how hunter-gatherer, fisher cultures existed. It isn't so much knowing where to pierce the deer once you've got it, but a stalker in Scotland can spend 4 days on the hill having to worry about his smell going downwind, having to take 4-mile diversions round a lake just to stop his smell affecting the deer. That's the world our ancestors lived in. We have these, as you said, towers for defense. Hunter-gatherers, killing. Nope. Towers for signaling and controlling and synchronizing communities' work, ritual and processes. And specialist trackers for tracking resources, not for killing deer. It's just too superficial. So yeah, I think you should look right at those tracks, and maybe the tracks are shown going through different environments to perhaps express the time that was spent tracking.
Yeah. So that's thanks so much for pointing this, because it's very, very important and for future interpretation of this site for sure. Yeah. Besides the tracks of animals, there are some designs of human feet and human hands, like so also the print, handprint, we can say, or footprints. So also beautiful design, but also on the separate panel to the west, a huge panel. There are many examples of the sandals, beautiful carved on the stone, on the cliff wall, sandals in different locations. Ancestral Pueblo people were wearing yucca sandals. I mean, yucca woven from sandals woven from yucca fibers. So and they were beautiful, painted and also designed. And you can see almost the same designs carved on the wall. I mean, on the sandals carved on the wall. That you can see, for example, in the museums on the sandals preserved from the 12th or 13th century. So, and those sandals actually were located inside of the buildings, we suspect, because we can trace a lot of, maybe not a lot of, but some beam sockets above those sandal images. and remnants of the stone architecture below. Just few courses of the masonry, and the beam sockets supports the idea that there were supporting the roofs, or the beams were for roofs. So different these spirals were like outside. For the audience, for maybe the bigger audience, for conducting the ceremonies, maybe connected with astronomical observations. I will put back to this issue in a moment. But they were designed just to like a huge gallery and maybe devoted for the ceremonies, like open gallery, But those sandals on the separate panel, another panel, were inside buildings possibly. So different kinds of rock art and different kind of activities that were conducted by ancestral Pueblo people, even a ritual, ceremonial, but also domestic in some panels located farther, it's like in different sites, different one of these 21 sites. Some of the images in different sites that we documented last season are, for example, triangles. And triangles meant in Puebloan iconography, sometimes they could have meant, like the shape of the mountains, or they could resemble the mountains, they could symbolize mountains. And it's interesting because those sites are located roughly on the elevation of 700 meters above sea level until 1700 meters above sea level until 1800 meters above sea level. And most of the rock art panels are facing directly south. In the distance of 5 to 6 kilometers is the highest summit, the highest peak, and the highest mountain range in the area, rising 3,000 meters above sea level. So 1,000 and 1,200 meters above those sites, and with several peaks.
Oh, Radek, I'm obsessed with meridians, and I always ask everybody that's on to give me an example of a meridian or a north to south alignment that was identified by an alignment either north or south to the largest mountain in the environment.
Yeah, possibly. And most of the cliff dwellings from this Castle Rock community located in the same canyons, but a little more down, like 60 meters to 120 meters down below of these panels. Really most, maybe even the majority of the cliff dwellings are facing directly south to the highest peak of the area, to the south. But also, there are practical reasons possibly, because during the winter, they acquire more warmth and sun. That is also practical reasons, but also not only probably. So practical and ritual were mixed together in many past societies, or in Europe, in Old World, in and New World, in Americas, everywhere possibly. So this is also important. But also staying with Castle Rock Community Complex, we noticed. And we documented 4 what we may call, after the Scott Ortman, one of the archaeologists from the University of Colorado Boulder, he worked also in Crow Canyon before. I follow his idea of...
Who is that?
Scott Ortman.
I interviewed Timothy Pocketat from Illinois University.
He's dealing, Timothy Pocketat is dealing with Cahokia Mounts, and but Scott Ortman, I can provide you. He's my friend, very good friend of mine, so I can provide you the contact, for example.
Thank you.
So I followed this idea, and we documented what he proposed that maybe could function in the Castle Rock community. I mean, the 4 shrines we call stone circles as shrines, and these 4 stone circles or shrines are located roughly to the north, south, east, and west of the community, of the Castle Rock community. So to us, it means like they were designed the boundary of the community according to cardinal directions, to the north, south, and east and west. And it's not only from our imagination or perception, but also the location of shrines and mountains and plateaus or mesas were vital and are still vital for Pueblo people, for historic and modern Pueblo people, because they believe that the settlement is surrounded from four cardinal directions, but by shrines, mountains, mesas, and even dancing plazas. So probably we have in this community like very fine definition of the boundary of the community by these stone circles. These circles have diameters from 5 to 10 meters, and in this there are not completely circles. There is one opening in every circle of four circle.
Which axis? Is there a predominance in the orientation of that opening?
Yeah, it's pointing directly to the south, to the Ute Mountain, Sleeping Ute Mountain, we call this mountain, or to Castle Rock Pueblo, the community center, the biggest site, the settlement within the community. And one shrine, one stone circle, you can see even the mountains, the Bear Ears Mountains and possibly Abajo Mountains from the distance of 60, maybe 80 kilometers. So it's really a long distance. So these openings are strictly pointing towards south. I mean, the mountains, Sleeping Ute Mountains, the Castle Rock Pueblo, or even further prominent features in the landscape. So so it's also we made some experiments of intervisibility between the shrines, the settlements, and the towers, and all of these sites were connected in a specific manner. So not only towers were responsible for this visual contact, but the shrines also probably played a significant role in this communication, or a system may be calling for ceremonies or whatever, because in historic Pueblos, shrines were, and still are, in modern Pueblo societies, the shrines were used for making offerings, for prayings, for making some ceremonies, different kind of ceremonies. So just maybe talking more about this settlement complex, going a little outside from these petroglyph panels, but all of these things, I think they are connected to each other, because, and when I was standing in these newly discovered rock art panels, it struck me that we have to think again about this settlement complex and different complexes, ancestral Pueblo complexes, because before we were focusing only on a small part of the area or communities, and we missed something important, very important. So we have to analyze this, and we have to think again about these communities, because we had the picture that this community were consisting of 41 settlements with architecture, with rock art. 15 of these sites had rock art, but also we discovered the sites, like 21 more sites that probably were functioning in the same time that those sites below, so it means, because we found the same type of architecture, the same types of pottery, beautiful pottery in close to these rock art panels, like Mesa Verde black on white pottery. I mean, the black designs on the white surface of vessels, bowls, parts of bowls and jars and so on, and Mancos black on white pottery. So we are pretty sure that they were used in the same time. So we have to rethink our early ideas about the demography of this settlement system, about also the religious practices and the beliefs and the ceremonies that were conducted in this community, because it's like believed that in the 13th century AD, many activities were conducted within the settlements or very close to the settlements, because it was the times of danger, of attacks, not stable times, so unstable times. But now we think that a lot of activities were also possibly conducted far away, maybe in hard to access places, but far away from these like a bigger settlements, with beautiful designed architecture and so on. So we missed something very, very important. Because you ask also about these possible archaeoastronomic relations or astronomic relations to these spirals.
We've already discussed the sun dagger that was identified by Anna Soker in the Chaco Canyon, and the question would be, do you think it functions the same as what she suggested, whereby it was a shadow clock, or do you think there's much more going on?
In general, in Pueblo iconography, in terms of the rock art or murals, especially rock art, could have different symbolic meanings. For example, the spiral could be the symbol of the sun, but also could be the symbol of the wind, but also could be the symbol of the migration, like the physical migration from one place to another. That's also the explanations provided by our consultants from the Hopi tribe. So different, the spiral could be also, or concentric circle could be also the symbol of the water, of good water. So different connections, but also some spirals especially, but sometimes also concentric circles are connected, and we know this, with astronomical observations. And as you said, in Chaco Canyon was proved for a sun dagger site at Fajada Butte in Chaco Canyon, but also for several other places in Hovenwip National Monument that is located like 40 kilometers from the Castle Rock Settlement Complex. In Holy Group, Holy House, there are also proved concentric circles and spirals connected with summer solstice, for example. So we know for several sites, both in Chaco Canyon, in Mesa Verde region, and in Arizona, in Utah. They are not common, maybe, but we know that ancestral Pueblo people had this special knowledge, astronomical knowledge about these specific days in the year, the solstices and equinoxes. And I suspect that some of the spirals from this huge spirals panel, I would call it, have functioned in this manner because of these sites, as you mentioned, in Chaco Canyon and beyond, but also in the Castle Rock community. We conducted like a sub-project in the last 3 years, actually, with those mentioned before volunteers, Maya and Ros Gralia. We conducted with the help of Vince Macmillan, because I suspected that 3 of the 15 previously recorded rock art panels at those cliff dwellings and the community, the Castle Rock community, could have served like some stations or maybe some calendar or markers. And Hopi consultants suggested me also strongly when visiting one of those 3 suspicion sites that maybe this site could be connected with the winter solstice. So, I presented this idea in one of the conferences in Bern, Switzerland, and I was suggested by 2 archaeoastronomers, Cliff Ruggles and from Great Britain, and Andrew Munro from the University of Oklahoma in US, that the best way could be, to monitor those sites to prove if they were really sun stations, or maybe, I don't know, the shamans or religious leaders were watching for the sun in those panels during these solstices and equinoxes, we have to prove, we have to go to those sites every 2 or 3 weeks to monitor them.
You could set up a $400 webcam and film it 365, 24/7, and maybe put a gnomon in the spiral and watch the shadow.
But there is no connection to internet there, and it's also a problem with vandals that sometimes go to those sites, you know.
Sure, okay.
Some of them are accessible to tourists, so that's another obstacle or maybe a challenge. So that's one of the solutions for isolated sites, what you said. That's good. You are right. But we decided to
watch it.
Yes. And, you know, I spent 1 to 2 months in Colorado each year, but most of the year I live in Krakow when I am the faculty member at the Institute of Archaeology. So I have to provide at the Jagiellonian University. So I have to provide lectures, classes for students. And I have a family here, so I cannot spend the whole year in Colorado. I would like to. I would love.
Indiana Jones couldn't spend all his time looking for the Holy Grail either. He had to teach.
Yes, exactly. So Ross and Maya Gravias, they proposed me that they can monitor for me and go every 2 weeks to those 3 selected sites. And can you believe they did this? During the period of 2 years, or maybe 2.5 years, they went to each of these 3 selected sites and they monitored them. And, you know, we are pretty sure, we are sure for 100% for 2 sites that they were winter solstice observation points or markers or calendars.
You mean observing the sun setting on the horizon at the winter solstice or setting behind a significant feature? What do you mean?
Actually, going during the sunrise or sunset of the sun shadow interaction with the petroglyph panels, especially with the spirals.
Oh.
And in one site in Sand Canyon, we call this site 5MT129. There are 3 spirals, huge spirals, and a lot of cupules and marks between them. We don't know what they meant, these designs and scratching sometimes, some deep holes also, but the most important are probably those 3 spirals. And during the winter solstice, the sun, close to the sunset, it's like 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. It's like this event you can see maybe for 50 minutes maximum. So it's like the shade is going across the whole panel, crossing each spiral in the middle. It's really fantastic. And you can observe this only and it lasts like 50 minutes, and it's going, the shade is going across the sunny panel, and it's like covering the spirals with the shade completely, close to the sunset at one side. But at the other side, the rising sun is pointing to one of the alcoves in the site where are 74 drilled, not the holes, but the cupules, like the small cupules drilled, 74 roughly. And during the winter solstice again, because it's very deep cave or shelter alcove, so during half of the year, it's completely in the shade during the whole day. But, starting like mid of the summer or even early fall, early autumn, the sun is going a little down of the alcove. And in November, it's just touching these drills or cupules very close. And the culmination is close to the 22nd of December. It's close to the winter solstice. It's a spectacular accumulation of the light coming. The sun is low on the horizon, because it's the winter, and it penetrates this deep alcove with these 74 drills. But the sun is mostly focusing, the rising sun, on the central part of this row of cupules.
Okay, question. The alcove you described, is that a natural cave or a man-made alcove? And the reason is, if it was a man-made alcove, so they've oriented the alcove to suit that solar condition on the winter solstice. But if it's not that, if it's natural, it means they only selected and lived in sites that this occurrence happened within. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, but I mean the alcove with the 74 cupules, it looks like natural, but maybe it was modified by people, like making it more deeper. We don't know this. That's the good point again, because it's really deep. It's not, so, and we don't know for sure. We know for sure that before the central part of this row of cupules, of these drills, there are two beam sockets. So there are traces of some kind of architecture, for sure, wooden or masonry architecture that were covering part of the panel of these drills. So maybe at the central part. So possibly even more focusing the light, the sunlight, I mean the sunrise light, to the central part, even reduced the beams, from the left and right, and focusing only on the central part. And in the first case, the site 129, the petroglyph panel is located outside the alcove. In alcove, there are remnants only of three structures: two kivas, built one inside another. One probably was destructed or burned, and the second one was built inside, and only one room attached. It's a very specific site because, the kivas now are used only for rituals in modern Pueblo societies. In pre-Columbian, pre-contact, pre-Hispanic times, the kivas were used both in ritual and domestic purposes, for sure. But rituals were very important in terms of the function of the kivas. Kivas were underground structures. A lot of architecture, the domestic and storage architecture in 13th century, 12th, 13th century were above ground, but kivas were deep, covered with soils. So it's like it was connected with the beliefs of ancestral Pueblo people, for sure, because they believed that their ancestors came from the lower world, even a series of 3 or 4 worlds up to the world that exists today. So it's really, there are a lot of connections. And outside this alcove, this shelter, small shelter with these two kivas and only one room, it's not for living, for big family even. Believe me, it's like for me, looks like the place for residing of 1 or 2 people, maybe sun watchers or something like that. Maybe it's too big, there are too big words, but it looks like not typical domestic site. And the panel with these 3 spires are located just to the west of the alcove on the relatively flat cliff face and facing directly south. So we discovered this also for the winter solstice, that it's a really fantastic view of this. We are preparing to publish these results, and I said before that these volunteers, Maya and Rosgralia, were monitoring every 2 weeks. So we are pretty sure that in other periods of the year, there are no so striking connection of sun-shadow interaction with those panels. The beginning, it's not only, you cannot only see at the winter solstice. It's not true, because it's not as precise equipment, but you can see the beginning of the interaction of the sun-shadow interaction with the spirals roughly 2 or 3 weeks before winter solstice, and you can see after winter solstice,
While in the 80s and 90s, archaeoastronomers and archaeologists projected half-arc seconds of accuracy into alignments, and if it fell out with that, they rejected it then. But Dr. Robert Barrett at Queen's University in Belfast explained that the 22 circular temples on Malta, almost like above-ground kibas, while so many researchers have negated any association with the winter solstice because of the variances, the portals, they're too wide and they vary by 5 and 10 degrees loosely towards the solstice. Robert Barrett calculated that by standing at the centre of the temple and looking out the door portal, they represent 15 degrees on the horizon or 20 degrees, and it's because the people were honouring from the late November to early February. A 3-month block of time was significant, with the solstice falling inside that. That's perhaps what you've described. It would be a fallacy to project modern standards of accuracy onto a bunch of people using a sun panel.
Exactly. And, even today, there are some ceremonies connected with winter solstice in Zuni Pueblo and other Pueblos. And it's not only one day. And historically, it wasn't only one day. But, the beginning of the ceremonial of the ceremonies and rituals began 1 or 2 weeks before the winter solstice. And winter solstice were like the accumulation of those events and ceremonies, and also they lasted a little longer after the solstice. So it's like not the only one day. This day is very important, but also there were associated some ceremonies and ritual connected several days or even 2 weeks or 3 weeks.
Radek, it was about a week ago. I was in my garden and I'd been watching the solstice a week before the solstice, and I see the sun setting behind the mountain we have in the west, and I watched then the 3-day standstill where nothing changes. But then what was more inspiring for me emotionally was about 2 days ago, a week after the solstice, I actually could say, right, that sun's definitely coming back. So I kind of emotionally reacted more to seeing the sun actually coming back north again, rather than this moment of nothingness on the solstice. So I can understand how the leading up and the after could perhaps have more of a sacred value, if you like, than the actual event itself.
Exactly. And also we have to have in mind and remember that, these astronomical observations, because for what purposes it was, not for pure observations probably, but
farmers know when to plant seeds. They don't need a priest with a staff.
Exactly. And we know from the ethnographic literature of 19th century Pueblo societies and even 20th century, it was important because they were counting the starting of the planting season from the winter solstice, for example, the Powamu ceremony in Hopi, for example, the bean ceremony from February. It's important time, for starting the planting season of beans, of corn later on, and so on. So, there were like true markers for this, as you said, farming societies. Very important utility,
The tendency for archaeologists is to talk about planting as a generalism, as in they planted at this time. But South American cultures, where I am in Colombia, especially the Muiscas, they counted the days from the winter solstice, not to when they planted their seed in March at the beginning of the wet season, but they had a whole series of procedures to fertilize the seeds, to select the clones that were going to produce genetically consistent plants and kill the clones that were weaker. So counting days from a solstice to when we plant the plant is a big, broad stroke generalism, because especially when the middle of February comes, when the rain starts to tease, the humidity increases. That was really important to get that right, because you had limited days to pop that seed or to root that clone before the rain happened. So it's all kind of described in the Farmer's Almanac today when these things happen, but it's fascinating to hear you put that into place, because I think there's, no matter what you can publish and conclude about the sun panels, it's always going to be like an architect inspecting the Houses of Parliament and focusing on Big Ben, the clock, with no concept of the entire architectural genius of the building that lies below, because it's gone in your sense. The people are gone. The thing that activates the panel are gone. And they were really the thing that switched it on and off, because you suggest they didn't work through the year. These were specifically visited at the winter solstice. That's what you find, yeah?
Yes, and during the summer solstice, for example, the site 129 is fully covered with shade. It doesn't work for summer solstice. But during the equinoxes, that the equinoxes weren't as important for Pueblo societies as solstices. But during the equinoxes, still we can observe some kind of interaction, different interaction than during the winter solstice. But there are some interaction in 129. There is almost no interaction in the second site with the 74 cupules. The site, we call it Sundial Ruins, after the local residents call the site Sundial Ruins, because when they saw this, when you see this, it resembles the sun clock or something like that. In terms of from the Western perspective, at least, but we have to have in mind that we cannot measure everything only from our point of view or our perception. I mean, the Western science, European or United States. But that's why I collaborate with Hopi people. But they also, they suggested strongly that one of these sites, it should be connected with winter solstice, because to them looks like the station for watching the sun during especially the winter solstice. So
here's the big question. You just cracked the egg. Let's do this. You just said for observing the winter solstice. Wouldn't it be more accurate to say for worshipping the winter solstice? Isn't this ritual rather than calendar keeping?
Yeah, that's true. And so that's why, after analyzing those sites in Castle Rock settlement complex, Castle Rock Pueblo complex, I think that the newly discovered spirals, at least at this one spiral panel, I would say, at least some spirals were connected with the astronomic observations, because they are located almost in the same manner, like in the site 129, the same facing and small overhang above the spirals. We have to maybe take another project and try to document those spires, but the location and some other the way of the making those spires are really very similar to those that we documented, and they looked like twins, I would say. So possibly they were connected also with astronomic observations. But we have to continue, of course, this research and try to prove this. Maybe set up cameras, as you said, and some other stuff. Because last season was we didn't have enough time to document all of these 21 newly discovered panels, and we have to devote 2 or 3 more seasons. I thought that we will close those area, and because we work also at another area in the monument, very fascinating, with many examples of rock art, not only ancestral Pueblo but also historic youth, depictions of hunting scenes and fighting scenes and so on, but a lot of inscriptions, historical inscriptions of first Euro-Americans in this area. But I have to work in both areas now, and not closing the Castle Rock settlement complex, because we have a lot of things to be done. And one more thing.
Well, no, you're saying one more thing. I have 2 questions for you before we wrap this up. You're not getting away that easy.
Okay. But I would like to be correctly understood in terms of this newly documented and partly discovered rock art panels, because I think they are integral part of the Castle Rock settlement complex. So this complex was bigger and more populated. So they are not separated to me from the complex. It is integral. It was integral part of this complex, settlement complex.
Right. Great. Here's the question for you that rises from all of this. Professor Charles Stanich told me that the Paracas culture in Peru, he described a landscape similar to what you have, but he explained that each pueblo had its own set of ceremonial roads and its own sacred mounds, which served similarly to what you said. But he suggested the whole environment didn't work like one coordinated ritual system, but that there was competitive feasting and competitive partying and competitive celebrations and festivals between rival emerging landlords, essentially, in the effort to try and gather, and the word he used was friends, people that you could create labor debt with, people that you could trade with. Do you think your environment operated under the control of one, let's just call it a priesthood for just now, because you can't say shamanhood, by one group of people working for a hierarchy that controlled these functions? Or do you think they were individual family groups or clans competing for some kind of social benefit?
That's the good question.
Which is it?
To me, looks like they were participating in one system of elite sites, because it was like one community of small sites grouped over or close to the settlement community center, Castle Rock Pueblo. And all of these kinds of evidence, like, the linkage or intervisibility between those sites, so relation and connection between those sites through the intervisibility and probably signaling, and also location of different settlement complex outside, close to the, probably competing. I would say that all of these sites and families were working together to survive in this not good environment. I mean, social and stress and natural environment changing, worsening natural environment. So to survive, to keeping him alive, they have to have different special kinds of ties, and even strengthen these ties physically and ritually, to because it was connected. As we know, all of this was connected. So to me, they were maybe were competing, but with different settlement complexes, to the north, to the south, because as I said at the beginning, Castle Rock Pueblo was one of the more than 60 different communities on the southeastern Utah and southwestern Colorado, so in the central Mesa Verde region. So 60 different communities of elite sites, I would say. This is not only my imagination, but Dr. Mark Berry and Professor Bill Light, they proposed also this idea, and I followed these. They were my advisors before in the committees. So, but I really follow because it works in my opinion, and it fits to the situation that we document. So we cannot. So I think one close cooperating organism of different families in the community, not competing with each other, but competing with outside communities, different communities, and outside world.
Thank you. That's answered that. I would like to leave our conversation with a suggestion, something for you to maybe consider, and it's this. I wrote a book 8 years ago, and what I did was I went to the Neolithic sites in Scotland and reinterpreted the ceremonial and sacred artifacts and showed that many were for the construction and the maintenance of calibrated measuring ropes. Because if a standing stone monument is to within half a degree of accuracy, then so too were the measuring ropes, which can swell or shrink by 2 degrees depending on the humidity on a morning. What I found at the end of that book, and I suggested, if you put a piece of string and measure the length of the string that fills the spiral, you might find the calibrated measuring unit for the associated sacred architecture.
Wow, that's really
Think about that.
fascinating. Thank you for this.
That's what I wanted to suggest to you was you said at the very beginning, some of them have 10 grooves, some have 11. I imagine you were to determine that slight difference was reflected in the circumference of the kiva.
Wow, thank you very much.
That's it. I always like to give something back, Radek, because you've certainly given us a lot. I can't thank you enough for this. It's been fantastic.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate that you invited me.
Yeah, indeed. And I'd like to invite you back on for season 2, whereby I'm going to have a visual component, and I could maybe ask you to, let's do 1 hour on the towers. Let's show the audience a map of the plotted towers, and we can play with lines and throw it about. And
also, especially after having the results from the guys from the University of Houston in Texas, because we'll have very detailed map, 3D map of the terrain, and so we'll know more for sure. So we can see, because we know that there were many earlier sites before the 13th century, not located in the cliff overhangs or alcoves, so not visible architecture. We can trace on the ground, but there are also some plants, so you cannot trace, like yucca, like spruce tree, like pinyon pine. So different trees. So, but the LiDAR can discover few more things. I think not few, a lot. I hope many. And also, so that's one. And also, I would suggest, if you would be interested, I can talk about this second research area that we work in Canyons of the Ancients since 2014. Because after few first seasons, the authorities of the monument and Vince Macmillan, the archaeologist, invited us to also start the second research area with huge galleries, I would say, open galleries, rock art sites, especially petroglyphs, but a lot of the biggest site is 130 meters in length. There are 600 depictions on this wall, and from different time periods, from the beginning of the Common Era, Ancestral Pueblo, basket maker, Ancestral Pueblo, rock art until 13th century, and later youth stuff, a lot of depictions of hunting scenes on buffalo, on deer, on mountain sheep, fighting scenes with bow and arrows and guns, appearing of horse. We can see different levels of youth hunter-gatherer rock art. And later, Spanish and Mexican shepherds appeared in this area, and they left their initials, names in the end of the 19th century. And later, American cowboys, believe me, they left their initials, names, stock brands as well. So we noticed 44 stock brands.
That's wild. You found an ancient textbook from prehistory up to modern day brand marks.
I call the same, or similar way, because it's the book. Really, it's the chronicle of this area, believe me.
Let's do a whole episode on that.
Yeah, okay.
Really?
We can do this. And, the fascinating social issue that we collaborate in this with local landowners. I mean, American cowboys, really cowboys, because the families that left these names, initials, dates, their sons and grandsons, still daughters, live in this area, and also we have to cross their land going to those sites.
You've answered my second question right back to the start: is how could this possibly have gone overlooked?
Yes.
But it's on private land, so that's why it's not been explored.
Yes, sorry, I didn't tell you this, but yeah, this area also was the monument was established 24 years ago, and part of the area was like in private hands. So, and the law in United States is that it's good, the protection of artifacts and sites, archaeological, historical sites, but only located on the federal and state lands. But in the private lands, the law is not facing this, and the landowners can do almost what they wanted with the pueblos or archaeological, historical sites on their land. So, but we didn't know what was going on in these private lands, or we don't know still today what is going on the private properties, unless the private landowners invite us to work with them at their properties. And I was invited several times, but that's the different issue. So that's why we still are finding for science, for the public, for the audience, new sites, because once they are located in very rough terrain, and the second is that they were until very recently in private properties, that we weren't able to enter to this land.
That's really exciting stuff. It just makes my mind whirl thinking about what else is out there, because Radek, as detailed as an interpretation as you've given me of these 41 sites, what's in my head is that these panel and observing and ritual sites are similar to you studying the 50 biggest cathedrals of England, but not having any access to the 5,000 churches and cells and religious buildings that have been built and collapsed before they got to the cathedral sites, which have survived. There's an entire architectural heritage out there in those surrounding landscapes that's probably greatly been worn away, but it's there, and you might just find foundations from, or even smaller dagger sites that are quite clearly progressions towards the great panel sites that unite astronomy, cosmology, wind, animals, seasons. There must have been steps towards that, like the first churches were, let's just align east. And then it got more developed and complex until it got to the major cathedrals.
Yeah, something like that, exactly. You have a very good impression on those sites, yeah.
Thank you so much for coming on, and we can't wait to speak to you again about the new discovery.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed this episode, you can unlock videos, maps, articles, and enjoy early ad-free new episodes by becoming a member on historyfuzz.com, where you can also apply to join our team exploring and filming archaeology documentaries in the Andean highlands of Colombia.